Hello everyone, I'm Giuseppe Maggiore and welcome to yet another episode of the Introduction to React course of the Grande Omega Academy. Today we're going to talk about props. Of course, when dealing with React components, in truth, what we are attempting to do is to render an interactive scene to the screen so that to the user, so that the user may perform some interactions in order to change the state of the application to the desired outcome. And the state of the application, well, in a sense, it exists for all practical purposes in the backend, in a database, where the user might want to create another entry that will eventually become the order of a product in a web shop, or the change of some information related to the user, and so on. But for us, the first step to get to that meaningful change in data that the user wants to achieve, there's an intermediate step, which is the local data of the local React application. And the data is partitioned in two. The read-only data, the properties, which we're going to see today, which are used to inject data into our usually custom components in order to make them perform the translation from this data to the DOM, to the screen, because yeah, you have data, but you need to show this data somehow on the screen. And later on, we will see how React deals with writing information back to the state, and how actually there is a feedback loop between state and properties. All right, let's dive into it. All right, now, conceptually and in practice, components, as we have seen now, for example, this A-list component, are just functions, normal functions. They accept arbitrary inputs, which we call properties, and they return React elements that describe how, based on this input, what should appear on the screen. So in a very real sense, we could even say that components translate the data that they receive as input into the corresponding React elements that are supposed to visualize them. And by using properties, we do inject this data into our custom components that translate onto the screen. Now, all React components must act like pure functions with respect to their properties, meaning that the properties cannot be changed. They are meant to be read-only. If you remember, we had the shameless plug component, which was in the footer. Okay, so we could say that the shameless plug component has these properties, and the properties are just a very normal React object. We could define the type of the properties as a separate type, which is very useful for reusing types around the application. This is just a very good practice. There we go. It's not always needed, but it's very strongly recommended. I would say, well, show a promotion. There we go. Okay. Now the shameless plug gets these properties. So we could say that, well, if we receive show promotion, then we actually show the promotion text. Otherwise, we show nothing whatsoever. Oh, and the semicolon is needed. Now we see an error in the shameless plug because the property show promotion is missing in type curly brackets. So what does it mean? It means that there are no properties that are set in this component. And so, yeah, the properties that are received are just the empty type. But they are required because there's the parameter show promotion. And you can see that if I start typing show, I actually get IntelliSense helping me set up these properties. What I'm going to do, I'm going to actually include the same properties also, yeah, why not, for the footer component. And here I will say, well, I think there's a way to simply say, okay, get the whole properties. Yes, this makes a copy of the properties. which is quite handy if we want to copy multiple things at the same time. Otherwise, we could also copy one by one. Okay. In this case, because it's really the same type, I find it particularly cool to be able to simply say, well, take over the whole properties. If we take a look at the compiler, well, now of course we get a complaint because the page again needs properties. And okay, now I'm going to exaggerate a bit. I will keep getting these shameless plug props. Probably the type. Oh, need to export it. Yes. There we go. So most likely the page would have different properties that might include the shameless plug properties or some sort of marketing or promotional properties. But for now, given that we are only playing around with a basic setup, we're just going to get the shameless plug properties and just drill them down into the footer. Oh. And finally here, okay, so for the page, well, for the page, actually now we're going to make a different, to go for a different approach, because now we've reached the top level of the application. So here, I'm going to have to get a show promotion from the parent. And where does the parent get it from? The parent gets it from here, the main. Oh, we see that here we're getting true. Let's render, and we get the promotion. Let's set this to false. We render, and there we go, it's gone. Let's also remove this super ugly testing list, because we don't need it. And there we go. Now, one word of warning. Here you see that, indeed, we're passing down the same properties, and this is this concept of drilling, because you drill down the properties. Actually, presumably, the properties should be a much richer type at the page level, and then every component, like the header, the main content, and the footer, they will get a slice, a different, we call it a projection or narrowing in focus. So we get a lot of properties for the whole page, and only a part of this is relevant for the header, only a part of this is relevant for the footer. Maybe they have overlap, maybe they do not. Splitting logically the data that goes into the various components is very important, because by having a component only get a subset of the properties, you're also making sure that the reader of your code sees, okay, this component only needs this information from the global application, not all of it, just a subset of it that corresponds to what the component is really about. So yes, this bit of discipline of software engineering is absolutely, truly vital. Let's bring a little bit of structure to this. Now I think it's truly time to move this to a new file. We're going to move this to the shameless plug component. And we will have, well, yeah, okay, the shameless plug props. Yes, we want to create everything, but actually this is clearly not correct, because the shameless plug itself, the component needs to be split from the properties. So tuck and move to a file, enter new file path, and yes, this I like. All right, and also, yeah, for now we can call, no, I want to call this state, because this has to do with the information, with the input and the output of the component, which is in a sense the stateful the state manipulations of the component. You might notice, okay, this is a very small file. Yes, don't worry. When dealing with states, properties, and updaters, these files grow. It's okay. So it doesn't stay a problem for too long that the file is small. But at least now we've also achieved something that's quite important. We split the component itself, which in our case encodes some important business logic, namely that, okay, based on this Boolean parameter that we get as input, we decide whether or not to render something. And we might also, for example, get some of the text of the shameless plug from the properties that we basically then only activate when the show promotion featured flag is turned on or off. So this component performs basically this translation, and that's all you need to focus about. And the definition of the type comes from somewhere else. Okay, now I do like to keep the promotion, so let me make sure that everything works. Yes, everything still works. All right, now let's consider now more juicy component. So let's move to the client folder, to the page, to the main content, and inside the main content we are going to create a file product.tsx. We start with a completely unsplit file, and then of course we are going to add more and more components to it. And actually, I've made a mistake immediately. So start with a product folder, because all the things related to the product, so the properties, the state, etc., will be moved out of it. Okay, now, so there will be multiple files here as we are used to. We start with the definition of a product. And a product, well, has a unique identifier. I will just call it ID, but well, it's a safe assumption that this will be unique and probably come from a database. A name, a description, and an image URL. Okay, very good. Then we have the product properties. So what does the product component get? I could say, well, the product properties for now, they get a product, but it's very important to realize these are not the same type. The product corresponds to the database definition of the product. So what data do we have and can we expect comes from the backend, or the backend might want if we can edit the products or create a new product. So this is the data. This is the React input for the product component, which might also contain other things like, are we editing or not? Do we want to show it? Do we want to show or hide the description, if it's possible to close or open the component, etc. So this is the data from the pure data domain. This corresponds to the database. This doesn't change very often. This corresponds to the rendering domain, and it changes whenever the model or design of the application or the logic of the application or the user interaction kind is adjusted in the front end. All right. So we might also consider that, well, this, we could say, okay, this is the model, or, but actually I'm going, this could both go into the state if we want. We could consider moving this product definition to the API. There are many ways of splitting files, and the point of this lecture is to suggest you have to find a logical, reasonable, consistent way to split. Which one? Yeah, that tends to change all the time, and it's kind of a fashion thing also to an extent. Okay, then let's define the product itself. The product will take as input, well, product props, and will return. If we also want to see the proper type, well, it returns a JSX.element. So all of these div things, etc. Oh, wait. Yes, are what we call a JSX.element, which is a sort of interface or common type that all these elements in HTML and also custom React components that we've built all respect. So everything we do is a JSX.element, whether it's built in or it's a custom one. Okay, now we can have a div surrounding the whole thing. We could say, okay, class name is product. We're going to try to improve this. I suck at visuals, but we're going to play around with it and make it a little bit less terrible. We can put a header, which will be props.product.name. We put a paragraph with the description, and finally we can put an image, and the source of the image will be props.product.image URL. Very good. Okay. Now, first we split. Always split. Product, and then now let's call this just product state. Okay, very good. Now we may use this component from our main content. Okay, let's go to our main content. And here, well, it kind of makes sense that I might want to have products. So I will, there we go, pass my product. And of course, well, we get a complaint because the product is not there. And now we need to initialize stuff. So ID, doesn't matter that much. Name. Okay, so something from my childhood. Fiat Panda 4x4 Sisley. Google it, it's an absolute beauty. Description. Well, this is an indestructible auto. It's ugly, uncomfortable, loud, and it's also slightly undignified. But it will take you from A to B over and over again, no matter the circumstances. Of course, this data shouldn't be inlined like this. Data should be the data should come probably from a database or a more adequate place. But for now, we're going to just inline it in the sources. And finally, the image URL. Okay, for this I hope you will forgive me. I'm not going to just type this manually. I will go into my my reference because yeah, I have done this already. Page, main content, products, the mocked product responses, and the image URL. Is this one. There you go. All right. Now, let's take a look at what is happening in the front end. And, oh, well, there you go. Fiat Panda 4x4 Sisley, an indestructible auto. Ugly, uncomfortable, loud, and slightly undignified. Okay, very good. And the picture of the wonderful, amazing, absolutely and utterly exceptional Fiat Panda 4x4. Oh, wait. I accidentally opened an image search tool. Okay, I don't think we need a console for now. And then you see the footer, and you see the header, and you see the title of the application, and it all makes perfect sense. All right. Now, let's put some more products. Let's put some more products, and let's actually get them here from the mocked product responses. Okay, so the first one we had already. Let's pick the second, and there's only one difference, I guess, which is that we didn't call it image, but rather we called it image URL. Okay, I'm just going to put everything in one line, even though when you have the feeling to organize code, to put things in one long line, because otherwise you have too much, you take up too much space. That is a good sign that you should probably split up your sources and reorganize them more meaningfully. But we will do this in a moment. Okay, so now, okay, this was probably one. And now we get the 3 pictures. I'm wondering why I picked different sizes for the images, but it doesn't matter. Okay, very good. And so we have the Toyota Corolla, which is kind of a similar car to the Fiat 4x4, even though perhaps more for an international market. I think if you own a Toyota Corolla, the car might actually outlive you and everyone you know, because these things are indestructible. And then I decided to also put something a little bit classier, just an A-class, which doesn't really match, the Fiat Panda 4x4 Sisley and an old style Toyota Corolla. All right, but anyway, let's also go for another improvement. This is a minor one, but you might notice that there's plenty of things that have an ID. And we could say, okay, you know what? This is an identifiable object. Is an object with an ID string, and now we could use TypeScript's ability to combine types by saying that a product is identifiable and it has all these things. And I'm going to move the definition of identifiable, which admittedly is a very small thing anyway, but I will move it to shared, and then states or state, and then identifiable, and then it's going to say the folder doesn't exist. Yes, of course it doesn't, and off we go. Because if you have the same definition over and over and over again, you don't want to run the risk that in one place you use ID with a capital letter, in one with a small one, some places you call it UID, etc. So in order to enforce consistency and to, well, not enforcing consistency isn't something you do by punishing people with code reviews when they don't work. You create a so-called funnel of success that guides users of your application to conform to best practices by making it easier to conform to best practices rather than not to. Okay. Now let's make the main content a little bit prettier. So let's start by saying that we have, well, some sample products. And this will be an array of product. Okay. Oh, how very embarrassing. Okay, doesn't matter. So as product state. Okay, there are two ways of doing this. One that I personally really like would be to change all these things to a name like product widget or product component. Or we could change the name of the product type to, for example, product state. That could also make sense, or product model. Or something else, I could say that I import the whole module as product state, and here I can say product state.product. I'm going to use this one today because it shows an extra feature, you could say, of the language, which is if you have things in different modules with overlapping names, there actually is a way to get around this issue. Okay, now I'm going to pick one by one these definitions. 1, 2, well, they do need commas. There you go. My face is in the way of you seeing I put the commas, but I promise I have. And also the last one in case we decide to add another one. Okay, very good. And now, well, we're not going to put just some components, but an expression that calculates a part of our virtual DOM. In particular, I will map across the products, and for every product, I'm going to put the product P in component product. Okay, let's take a look at whether or not this works. Okay, and the application is exactly the same as it was before. Okay, and but we see there is a complaint. Each child in a list should have a unique key prop, because whenever we have an array of components which are clearly calculated, because it's not just one component after the other, React here says, okay, have an array of components, renders them all, but then it knows, okay, this is an array, so it might change in length based on, well, in our case it doesn't, because this is really a constant, but yeah, React doesn't know. React asks us to put here a key in order to make sure that what we're rendering can be easily identified across re-renders in order to speed up the reconciliation of the virtual DOM with the DOM. So we create a key that says product dash and then the product ID, and the product ID really has to be unique, but once again, it's a safe assumption. And we see that the warning has disappeared. We could also say that here we put a map of identifiable of ID into product state.product. So the map is a data structure that comes from immutable.js, which, oh, I see we don't have the immutable library, but the map would basically have connect the IDs to the products in such a way that the IDs are guaranteed not to be repeated. And I'm not going to go too far in this example. We'll do it later, or maybe in the advanced course. And we've seen extensively these data types in the TypeScript introductory course. But if we want to have a guarantee that there is no repetition, then using a data structure like a map enforces this uniqueness of the identifier. And this is actually particularly useful, because then you remove the margin of error. Like a lot of what we do as software engineers is try to tighten the grip on our semantic domain and our structures, that the margin for error goes down as much as possible. All right. Now, of course, good Samaritans. So we're going to move this somewhere else. Actually, let's organize things a little bit. So, for example, where are we going to put the products? Because now we have the main content, and yeah, the main content is not really the proper place to manipulate products. So let's define a new, let's say, layer. We're going to call this the products, and the products take as input as properties the products props. Wrong brackets. Okay. And I'm going to put this in a fragment, because maybe later on we're going to want to add something else. You never know. Okay. There we go. Yes. Okay, very good. Now we have to, of course, define the product properties. So type product props is, well, the products, and this will be an array of product state dot product. Okay, very good. Now we can instantiate the products, and of course the products want, well, the products, and here we will pass the sample products. Okay, now certainly the products themselves go to a new file, and this will be in products. Okay, there we go. Hop, off we go. And the product will be moved under products in order to create this logical hierarchy. Now, mind you, if the single product widget or component were to be used in another place, not only under this products overview, then we might want to put it somewhere else as a separate thing. But as long as the product is only a separate piece of the products, then we're going to say main content with products under it, and then with product under the products. So we enforce this hierarchical taxonomy, which we might want to revise later on. Where do we put the sample products? Well, actually, this is also interesting. For example, we could put them in, well, I think under products makes sense as the sample products, because it's not really the main content. But in any case, it doesn't belong to the main content, it has to come somewhere else. And now the cool thing is that the products are defined separately from the sample products, and it's the main content that is bringing them together. They might come from an API, they might come from, well, plenty of different places. All right. But now it's really time to improve the definition of. Oh, wait a second. Okay, this is complaining. For the rest, oh, other things are broken. Let's fix. Let's fix. Oh, of course. Oh, that was terrible. Of course, the products we're rendering come from the props, otherwise we're still picking them from the sample products. Okay, and I see yet another error. Where are you? In the products file. This is another perplexing error. Let's take a look at. The product, and there clearly is a product state. But the IntelliSense actually seems to be pretty happy and pretty persuaded. Oh well, let's start it up again. It was perplexing for a reason, because it was not an error. So yeah, okay. But let's go the deep end here. So we have this sample or at least certainly in the products themselves. Let's perform this change. Let's say that here we really want to have a mapping from the unique ID into the product. We want a guarantee that this thing is unique. Okay, first of all, we're going to go in the client folder and we're going to add the immutable library. So yes, let's not leave things undone. Whenever we have an idea for an improvement, we should do it like the good Samaritans that we are. Okay, now we import map from immutable. There we go. Okay, now, well, here we only want to get the values. Yes, and we want to turn it into an array. Okay, so basically very little has changed. Why do we have to do this value sec to array? Well, actually, let me see if things still work. Okay, I'm quite impressed. But still, so when you map over a map, what you get is basically a sort of sequence of key and value. But in our case, in order to render, we don't really care about the keys, so I get all the values and then I turn it into an array. So I'm trying to give a hint to React about what it exactly needs to do. There were older versions of React that were actually that would actually complain about getting an immutable map. So I'm happy to see that this has become more standardized and it's better arranged. The sample products, on the other hand, well, of course, now in the main content, there's a problem because, yeah, we have the sample products, but yeah, this is not a map. So what we're going to do is we take the sample products, and for every sample product, I create an array with the product ID and the product itself. And now I create an immutable map around it. First of all, because map is also a data type that is already present in the standard library, then I need to disambiguate. And oh, I see actually. Oh wow. Okay. Then there you go. It's happy. And in case there were two products with the same ID, actually, let's make this mistake. So let's say that there are two products, and let's call it Fiat Panda 4x4 Sisley repeated. Okay, what's going to happen is that, yeah, we get the repeated one because the repeated is added on top of the first one, but the ID is overwritten. And there are only 3 cars because there are only 3 unique IDs. So we are adding, in a sense, a sort of layer of extra correctness. And you might wonder, okay, but such a conversion should always be possible. I would like to nerd this out completely, and yeah, indeed, we could also create a data structure that performs this translation. So let's do it, because it happens all the time that you have a collection with IDs and you want to turn it into an array with IDs, and you want to turn it into a map where the ID has been isolated as the key of the map. Okay, so array of identifiables to map. Okay, so this is generic, and the type of the entity has to extend identifiable. Okay, we get as input the entities, which is an array of entity, and we return a map of identifiable of ID. Should we ever want to change IDs to numbers or another data type, well, then this definition would adjust itself, and then we return the entity. Okay, cool. Now we create the map of the entities, and there you go. And now we could simply say identifiables to map all the sample products And off we go. And you might wonder, okay, and what about this thing? Well, this thing obviously has to move somewhere else. And where are we going to move it? Well, we're going to move it up into shared. And these are, well, I would say this is stuff related to state and state manipulation. I consider state to be a bit of an umbrella term for anything that is related to the manipulation of our data. Of course, we want our products to be a little bit more stable because the map could change in the map could change in order. There is no guarantee of the order of storage, and I always think it's. Oh, wait a second. I'm slightly surprised. So sort by. Ah. Oh, how silly. Of course, after this, yeah, I'm going to show what I saw. So this P is a JSX.element. So here what we see is what you want to do with the JSX.element. And that is absolutely nothing. But, okay, so we could take the value sequence before. Then we sort by the ID of the product. And this way we also ensure that the rendering that we perform is always in the same order, no matter how the product data structure was passed to the map for the construction of the map, because we want to have some control. And maybe it's not an ID, perhaps we should have a presentation order like 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Doesn't matter. It's always a good idea when dealing with sequences and arrays to enforce a stable order, stable with respect to our data. And even if we don't have something that our designers told us to use as an order, then just use the ID. Then you guarantee that the order is always going to be the same. Because otherwise, imagine that for whatever reason the map is regenerated and switches the order, then the user is going to see things jumping up and down, and that is just quite terrible. All right, so. I had a bit of fun with this. We've seen how to start passing data, even though we're only reading the data, we're passing data around our application. The application has, well, I don't want to say it has a little bit of pizzazz because, well, it doesn't have pizzazz at all, especially with this super ugly catalog of terrible ancient cars. But at least the application is doing something that is a little bit more interesting, and especially we have this beginning of a hierarchy of information, a hierarchical taxonomy that encodes our understanding of how the scene is built up and how the scene is split in components. And if you take a look at, the products is a reasonably small file. Well, we could also split the products prop now as the last thing we do into the products. Yeah, I like to call it state. There we go. And then we have the product itself, which is again a neatly isolated small component. We had the product state. We've even split the identifiable. And by splitting the identifiable, we made it possible to have identifiables to map, because now we can say that, yeah, there's this little fragment of our application, which is the single identifiable, which can be part of many entities, and these entities, when they're identifiable, we can take an array of them and just turn them into a map. I hope you've enjoyed this a little bit. Once again, I certainly have. Thank you very much for listening, and see you next time. Bye bye.